Hello, Tammy and I are at the Wayne County Museum, Historical Museum in Richmond, Indiana. So we're going to take you through the museum. There's lots of things to see here, and I think there'll be some surprises. So come along with us. Huh? Oh, yeah. An old piano. Pretty grounds here with the museum. We've been here once before, a long time ago, and we wanted to see what changes there are. Richmond, Indiana is, believe it or not, home to some of the first jazz recordings, which there's a good display on that here. It's also a car museum and farm machinery museum, so let's go on in. We're going to enter another part of the museum. This is the automotive area of the museum. Of course, Indiana is known for a lot of its automobile manufacturers. And of course, the Indianapolis 500 and a lot of races that were around Indiana at the time. In Richmond, Indiana, where we're at, was a hub for manufacturing of the Richmond electric car, which they have here.
It's funny, look at the dashboard all set up there like an old.
Yeah. That's pretty neat. You can get in there and drive it. It's even got an ignition key in it. Look at those old gas stations from yesteryear. Thing is, I remember those.
I do too.
That should be familiar to a lot of people.
Big old steering wheels.
Dale Earnhardt. The old days of full service gas stations. As a teenager, I worked in one of those. That's where Tam and I first met.
Yeah, no, we met in school.
Well, we met in school, but she used to stop by the station where I worked. It was a Deep Rock gas station. Wow. World War II Indian? I think that's what it is. Nope, it's a Yamaha XX 650 tribute. Military tribute motorcycle. Old race car. Look at this. 1907 Richmond. Now Richmond built cars too. There was a lot of manufacturers when they first started making cars, automobiles. And Richmond was one of the lesser known, but there was a lot of automotive manufacturers here in Indiana and up in South Bend, where the Auburn Museum is up in that area, as well as South Bend, where the Studebaker plants were making cars. But this is a 1907 Richmond. I imagine a lot of you have never heard of a Richmond, but a 1908 Westcott, manufactured in Richmond. You could really see the cross between the horse-drawn carriages and the first automobiles that were made, right? Here's a 1909 Richmond touring car. That is something, isn't it? Look at the levers over on the side of it. Here's a good map of the production cars that were made in Indiana. Of course, Tammy and I grew up in Kokomo, Indiana, which is on this map right about there. And the Apperson, the Haynes, and the Haynes Apperson were all built in Kokomo. Used to be a tire manufacturer in Kokomo as well. But, well, I'll tell you.
Cars and Converse?
Marion? Where do you see Converse at? Oh, really? 1914 to 1915. Indiana was a big hub for automobiles. Of course, Indianapolis made quite a few of them, but there's a 1915 Westcott, manufactured in Richmond from 1909 to 1916. Yeah, let's get the electric cars now. Everybody is going to electric cars, right? But they forget that they were made back at the turn of the century. So this is a 1912 Baker Electric. Baker Motor Vehicle Company began production automobiles in Cleveland, Ohio in 1898. The first Baker vehicle manufactured went to inventor Thomas Edison. Wow. Top speed, 30 miles an hour.
Fast back then.
Well, yeah, it was kind of fast back then. But you can see the electric car. And here you get a good sense of the batteries that was in these cars. Take a look at that. Actually, if you can make it out, those are wooden boxes the batteries were made out of. But this is Julia Meek Gar electric car. 1921 Detroit Electric.
Go up to 80 miles before it has to be recharged.
Yeah, 80 miles before
20 miles an hour.
it would need to recharge it. Highest speed reached was 20 miles per hour. The cost was $3,500 in 1921. The new Teslas are much more than 45,000. You'll see later that the Meek and Gar name is associated also with farm machinery and steam engines, which we'll show you in a little bit. But there is a picture of a video of an electric car.
That one. Man, his grandpa's gas pump.
Yes, that was, I think it was called a Royal Crown.
It's got the name on the front of it.
Oh, there's so many beautiful cars here. 1920 Pilot 45, manufactured in Richmond. Pilot. Wow, you can see the restoration of that, the pictures they have of it. 1922 Pilot Sportster. It was manufactured here in Richmond. Look at this little sidecar coming out of the side of it. Look at that. Little side seat coming out of it.
No hair and hang on to it. You've seen it.
A 1926 Dodge. You can see the emblem. Dodge Brothers. Before they were gobbled up by Chrysler. Began production in 1914. Dodge built 249 cars.
We did sign that we're on the pump. Gas 9 3/10. State and federal tax 4.5. Total 13 8/10.
9 cents a gallon. Look at that. Wouldn't that be cool?
Before tax.
Yeah. $0.17 a gallon. Actually, we had some of those old oil bottles on our farm when I was a kid. Dad would use them for oil for the tractor. We had an old Farmall, I think it was a 1948 Farmall H. A Crosley. Who said they didn't build small cars back then, huh? Manufactured in Richmond, Indiana. 1939 Crosley. Wow. Look how little that thing is. Look how little the tires are. Well, that's a little bitty engine too. Look at that thing. Huh. I'm not sure what this... Look at that telephone in there. First telephone in cars. First direct dial car telephone. Pretty neat display, isn't it?
It's a Chrysler stereo.
Uh-huh. 1925 Davis Chrome, manufactured in Richmond, 1908. He was a wagon builder. Well, most of them came from wagons or even bicycle builders. Well, that's something, isn't it?
Fancy.
Oh, yeah. Look at the size of the headlights on this thing. You know, in some of the cars, as you turned the corner, the headlights would turn too, so you could see around the corner. That was a unique thing. Well, there's some kind of steps too. All the comforts at home. Oh, this is just... little bitty engine. Crosley refrigerator. Reminds you of that Indiana Jones movie where he takes everything out and jumps in there because it's a lead lined. Look how little that thing is. Well, look, I mean, it's really no smaller or bigger than
It's like a Volkswagen.
the new cars today.
Yeah.
Which little livery, feed, and sale stable. A while ago, that's where the farm machinery was, and the blacksmith shop. We're entering another building here. This is the farm machinery section of the Wayne County Historical Museum. And this, believe it or not, is a horse treadmill. And what they did was they the horse would walk on this treadmill. And by doing so, it would turn this enormous wheel that you see here, which would then power other farm machinery just by the horse walking on the treadmill. Here's a good picture they have of it right here. It's a small threshing machine from the 1800s, and that's how they used to farm. Horsepower. Now, the definition of horsepower is the capability, I think it's the capability of lifting 500 pounds in 1 second or something of that nature. I'd have to look it up what the definition of horsepower is. But one of the early Gar Scott steam engines. Obviously this is a small steam engine, but they actually got enormous. And we'll show you one here in a minute. There's a little bigger one outside. But they've got all kinds of farm machinery here that was all made in Richmond, Indiana. And this was another piece of machinery made here in Richmond. And this is what they called the threshing machine. Made at the Gar Scott Manufacturing Company. You can read that. It's all, of course, made of wood, and you can see the big belt that went around it that helped powered it. And they would put a twist in the belt like that to keep it on the wheels, because there was no guides. Here's an old planter. What they called a seed drill. Let me walk around the other side so you can get a better view of this big threshing machine over here. You can see the size of that thing in the background. Beautiful piece of machinery. That's what they used to call a seed drill, a planter. We would basically call it now, but from the very big to the very small. Various pieces of farm machinery. One of the first metal discs. A cider press. You filled the big tubs up with apples, and then as you screwed these things down, press all the apples, and then out the bottom would drain the apple juice. A lard press. The old livery stables. And every farm had some kind of a blacksmith shop. Or there was a blacksmith in the neighborhood that would help the farmers with their horses and making tools for them. This is a working blacksmith shop, although they're not doing it right now. And you can see all the different tools they used to make different kinds of things. Usually the blacksmith was kind of a jack of all trades. He made everything for the farmers. from horseshoes to different kinds of tools to just about everything. He was the kind of the jack of all trades. And I was a young boy growing up in our little small town in northern Indiana. We had a blacksmith. He used to make all kinds of things, and I remember watching him. I was a boy of all of 5 or 6 years old. I think I'm lucky to have those kind of memories. Kids today have no idea what that's about. I don't know if you can see it here in the dark, but this is one of the old Gar Scott steam engines. And they made all different kinds of sizes of these things. And this is a pretty good size one, but they made gigantic ones. I mean, one that was twice, 3 times the size of this thing. It just depends upon what you used it for. You can see all of the levers and the boiler. We chuck in the coal or firewood. And all the different levers that did different things. Let's see if I can get you closer up, or maybe where it's not in the dark. Gigantic iron wheels. It all ran on steam. See the boiler, and there's part of the steering gear. Would yank on these chains basically, which would turn the front wheels. And all these were made here in Richmond, Indiana. Now Tammy and I were recently at Eaton, Ohio, and at their pork festival, and there they had an old Gar Scott steam engine operating. And what they had done was tapped into the steam lines of the steam engine and ran it over to big cauldrons and boilers, and they were making apple butter with the steam engine. So that was really unique, and to see one of these things operate. And of course they generated a huge amount of heat. But you can see down there, that's the steering box with the chains wrapped around that box. And as you turned the worm gear and turned the crank, the worm gear in the center turned, which then pulled on the chains. Pretty simple technology, and it worked. But there's another one setting over here. I'll walk over and give you a shot of it. But these things were very, very unique. I'm not sure this is going to come out because this picture is inside a glass frame. See if I can get you a better picture of it. But that was the factory, the Gar Scott Factory here in Richmond, Indiana. You see how huge it was at one time. But there's a lot of glare on the glass, so I'm not sure it's going to come out. But where a lot of the steam engines and different kinds of manufacturing of farm equipment was made here in Richmond, Indiana. You can see this steam engine. It's a little different type. The guy would stand back here with a big steering wheel and then stoke it through the door there. The massive iron wheels. We saw one of these in a parade when we were over in Eaton at the pork festival, and they had put rubber tires and rims on it instead of the big iron ones like this. And it was in the parade. It had regular semi tires on it. But you can see how massive these things are. And again, this is a pretty small one. The ones they had were just massive, huge things, and they ran different things. Again, you see the worm gears here, how they steered it. A pretty simple mechanism. We just yank on these chains, turning the front wheels one way or the other. But these massive wheels like this had a belt on it, and the belt would run over to other farm machinery. Usually what you saw them connected to was like a giant sawmill, where the saw blade itself was probably 6 foot across, something like that. And it was an open blade. I mean, there was very little guards on this stuff back in those days. Very dangerous work. And that's why a lot of farmers were injured or killed. Well, some of that stuff was really, really dangerous. But that's how they did it back in the day. And again, they put a big twist in the belt that would help keep the belt on the pulleys. Engine number 3081. Oh, it's something. Of course, this is non-operational. This is Robinson and Company. It's instead of the Gar Scott, but they eventually merged together, I believe. But these things with the belt, they could run a sawmill, they could run a threshing machine. They had a machine that was called a shingle machine that made wooden shingles. They had balers for straw and alfalfa and things like that would make bales. They ran different kinds of machinery with these things. And again, all of it ran around this big pulley with a belt. Of course, the faster, the more steam you put from the steam engine, the faster the belt would run. Now, a lot of the steam and gas shows that you can go to, you can see these type of engines in operation. And let me tell you, they are hot to be around. And I've been able to see them actually operate. And my father at one time used to help on displays at county fairs with the shingle machine or with the sawmill and different other machinery that they used to have. But these were the first farm tractors that they had. When we lived on a farm, he had an old 48 or 49 Farmall Super H. But these were way before that. And some of these steam engine companies were bought up and then they ended up being absorbed by other companies later on, like Farmall or like International. McCormick was another one. But these things are just beautiful in their engineering and design and simplicity. Gorgeous pieces of machinery. Smokestack there, which actually you could take off when you were cleaning out the boiler and cleaning up the thing. Beautiful pieces of machinery.